everyone. Hope you had a good weekend. Just want to spend a little bit of time going over some of our info from last week and give you a little preview for this coming week. So last week we talked about physician practices and the economics of the physician practice setting. And one thing I want to touch on, I'll touch on it more in the quiz section, has to do with kind of economics, microeconomics overall versus microeconomics in the healthcare setting. So there's definitely a difference when you look at kind of how things like supply and demand and some of the different theories of microeconomics function in, say, the corporate world, the industry, like how you make pencils, how pencils are sold, how that works versus how things work in healthcare. So, like for example, I put this example in the classroom somewhere. It was hopefully it was in the discussion boards. It may have been an answer to one of the quiz questions, but I think I put it in the classroom for everyone to see. For example, here in the Northeast, where in New York, and I'm sure this happens in Pittsburgh as well, but I know a couple of you don't live in the Western PA region, but if you've ever lived in an area where there is snow, and I'm sure this is impactful for you guys that have rain events as well, like tornadoes or hurricanes, etc. When there's a storm impending, prices for things like gas and bread and milk and eggs and water go up. So here in New York, anytime there's today gas may be $2.75, but if I go back, if today they forecast a big snowstorm for tomorrow, which they won't since it's 93 degrees outside, but if I see a forecast for a snowstorm tomorrow, if I go down tonight to put gas in my car, if it's $2.75 tonight, it'll be $2.85. Because they'll jack the gas prices up. Same with the store. Whenever there's a snowstorm, and if any of you have friends on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook that live in the Northeast, you'll see that there's always a run to the store. When there's a snowstorm, there's a run to the store for milk, eggs, and bread. I think everyone makes French toast when it's snowing outside. But so when you go to the store, yesterday, milk, eggs, and bread were this price. When you go today, they're 10 to 15 cents more because, for whatever reason, they raise the prices. But it's because of demand. There's a greater demand, so they'll see what the market can bear, and they know that people are going to buy it. They're not going to not buy these things, so they won't. It's not price gouging. They're not going to charge $2 more. That would be price gouging. They'll just raise the price a little bit, what the market can bear, and then they'll get a few extra dollars out of it, which helps pad their pockets a bit. But what you don't see that is in healthcare. So you're not going to see physicians, you're not going to see a cardiothoracic surgeon raising the price of a bypass operation, a heart bypass operation, because people are eating more cheeseburgers and they're having more people come in for for a bypass. So you don't see those types of demand issues in healthcare. What we do see are demand issues like physician-induced demand, which we talked about this week, and those types of things. So that's where we see those types of issues come up. And that's the type of thing that we do need to talk about in this class. That's the type of issue that you didn't hear about when you took economics, either here at RMU or perhaps at a previous university if you transferred in. So those general economic principles, general theories, are one important set of information that you learned about previously, and now we're refining that knowledge with the physician or with the healthcare specific info. So let's talk about the quiz. I'm going to talk about all three questions because folks had different issues with different questions, so I'll talk about all three. So the first question was, explain the difference between economies of scale and economies of scope in physician practices. So there's one definition that applies. Economies of scale, economies of scope are theoretical principles in economics, but we want to apply it to the physician practice because that's what the question told us. So economies of scale are, if you think about, let's think about a company like CVS. So economies of scale are telling us that CVS can buy pharmaceuticals at a lesser price than mom and pop pharmacy on the corner. So economies of scale are saying they have a wider reach. They're buying more pharmaceuticals, great because they buy pharmaceuticals for CVS, all of them. So they have their wider reach, their scale, more stuff is hopefully going to create a lower price as opposed to lower cost, not necessarily lower price. They could still charge the patient the same amount, but a lower cost for CVS versus mom and pop pharmacy on the corner who doesn't have that scale. They're only buying for mom and pop pharmacy, one site, versus CVS, many, many, many sites. So that's an economy of scale. They are buying for thousands of stores, mom and pop pharmacy, one store. That is the way that, say, for example, integrated health systems. Integrated health system is buying product, maybe like an electronic health system, electronic health record. Sorry, an electronic health record. If you're buying it for single hospital, X amount of expensive. If you're buying it for an integrated health system, could be much cheaper because you're applying that to, say, 5 hospitals, 25 physician practices, a skilled nursing facility, a home health care agency. It could be cheaper because of that economy of scale. You're spreading it across all of those sites. So by spreading it out, by spreading out that cost, it could make it cheaper. So that's economy of scale. When you think about economy of scope, you're then talking in a slightly different way. So instead of it being one item spread across multiple areas, you're talking about a variety of items. So when you think about economy of scope, you might think about, say, a physician practice that has multiple specialties. So you may have a general surgeon. So you might have a general surgeon that has a practice in a multi-specialty group practice, but within their practice they have a cardiologist that can provide clearance for surgeries. They may also have primary care that can help to provide histories and physicals. They might have radiology in there that can do the chest x-rays for them. They might have a lab that can do their labs for them. So by having that wide scope, that is going to provide that economy of scope, all within that single practice. So they don't have to worry about referring out to some other organization and hoping that that organization is going to get the work done. They're all right there in that one organization. So if they're not getting it done, they actually have some pull to get it done within a reasonable amount of time. So economy of scope, variety, not necessarily under one roof, but variety within one organization. Economy of scale is going to be kind of the same thing spread across, having a lot of one thing, enough to lower that cost. So hopefully that makes sense. The one thing that I will say, this is where I wanted to bring that up. So economy of scale, economy of scope. So if you went out to the web and looked those things up from just said, tell me what these things are. Maybe you read about it in the book, you didn't really understand it because this textbook makes the assumption that you understand the theoretical principles of economics because you should have taken the economics class already. You've either transferred it in or you have already taken it at RMU. So it's making the assumption that you have had that economics class. If you don't understand the basic principle behind these things and you go out to the web, which the web is a great resource as long as you're using types of resources that, not Wikipedia, but types of resources that are helpful. There's great resources on the web that are legitimate and can provide you good information. Go out, research, find info on, for example, economy of scope, economy of scale, and figure out what they mean in general industry. That's a great thing. But then be sure to take that information that you've learned and bring it back to your textbook. Look at your textbook and say, okay, So how do those things, how do the concepts of economy of scale, economy of scope, how do they apply to the healthcare setting? Because sometimes what they're saying as it applies to widgets like pencils doesn't apply in healthcare. So sometimes you need to take that widget approach and see how it applies, and that's what our textbook will tell us. Also remember, I'm here. That's what I do. That's what I get paid for. So if you don't understand something, call me, email me. I'm happy to meet up in the classroom and talk about it. I'm happy to chat on the phone about it. I'm happy to put together a video if you want. I can do some slides, and if you can watch it at your leisure, you can rewatch it. Anything that will help you, that's what I'm here for. So I'm happy to do those things for you. But don't rely just on what you see in like Investopedia or something like that, because that's great economic information, but it may not apply in the healthcare setting. It applies, but it's not the full description of what the healthcare setting is telling us about. Okay, next thing. Explain the concept of physician-induced demand. I'm not going to beat this to death because I know we talked about it in the classroom, but generally what the principle is, physician-induced demand is when physicians themselves induce demand on, kind of on their behalf. So the physician will typically be kind of responsible for inducing demand so that it benefits them. For example, they may order tests, they may order different types of ancillary services like physical therapy or various types of treatments. And ultimately, this demand is something that will benefit them in the long run. It could be surgical services. And ultimately, these are things, and to some point, what this concept is getting at is, are all of these things necessary? Now, to a point, they are, but not all of them. There's a number of them that obviously are. They wouldn't be paid for under insurance, but are all of them necessary? And that's what this notion is, that physicians induce demand. They create this demand for services to their own benefit. So that's the whole notion of physician-induced demand, that physicians create this demand for services, and ultimately it does benefit the physician. Okay, so question number 3. Give some reasons why there may be shortages of certain physician specialties or shortages of physicians in certain parts of the country. Now, different folks gave different types of answers, and what this question was getting at, I think, I didn't actually write the question, so I can't give 100% answers to what he was getting at, but there was some discussion about this in the textbook. So I think what they were getting at is what was in the textbook. However, there were some answers that were given that were getting at various reasons why there might be shortages, such as the growth in population. So more people, less doctors. The population's growing, but the number of doctors are not growing as quickly, etc. So that's a great reason why there are fewer physicians. There is a shortage of physicians. There's not necessarily any less physicians than there were in certain parts of the country, but there are many more people than there were. So things like that. But what the text talks about is things more related to like the cost of medical school, how much it costs, and then the lack of guaranteed salary. It used to be when you graduated from medical school, you tend to graduate with significant loans. When I graduated with my doctorate, I had massive loans. I still do, obviously, more than I could ever think to pay off within the next 10 years. But it used to be when a physician came out of medical school, they were guaranteed a decent salary because they were going to work typically for themselves. So as hard as they wanted to work was going to generate their salary. But that's not necessarily the case anymore. Most physicians are now going to work for organizations, and that's what they'll get paid. physicians now tend to come out of medical school making the same amount of money as anyone else that has a doctorate. So, and oftentimes their pay is, uh, you know, not anything as commensurate with their massive student loan debt. So it's difficult to think about. Okay, I'm going to have this massive amount of debt. Yet I don't have a guaranteed salary that's going to necessarily pay off that debt. It's difficult to think about those things and consider that as you're going into medical school. Other things that the text mentioned, things like inflexibility of work schedules, because depending on where you are in the country, if you work in a big city, you may have bigger flexibility because there are many physicians. So you may have that option. But if you're in a rural area, you may be it. So you don't have flexibility of work schedules. Things like job-related stress, this notion of massive burnout in physicians is a huge issue now. Something that's a big research focus for many folks in our industry. And the notion of risk of injury, that's another big one. I actually have a friend that's an OBGYN, same age as me, had to retire 2 years ago. Because he'd injured his back so many times, had so many surgeries, just from having to break down beds in the delivery room. So there is huge risk of injury for physicians, be it those types of injuries or other types of needle sticks, and there's just massive risk in being a physician. So are people willing to take those risks? Do they want to move forward? There are definitely other areas that physicians, folks that want to give back and work in healthcare can go into, and not necessarily being a direct care provider. So yeah, that's really what the question was getting at. But there are other. Those were the things that the text tended to talk about. But if you gave other reasons that were that made sense and were pertinent, I gave credit for those as well. So this coming week, we're going to be talking about hospitals. So the same kinds of things we talked about last week, but we're going to move to the hospital side. So we're going to talk about prospective payment methods, the medical arms race phenomenon, talk a little bit about the Herfindahl-Hirschman Index, and I'm going to apologize. There's a video, and I talk about this in the announcement for this week, but there's a video that auto-plays, and even though I do consider myself fairly competent in HTML coding and whatnot, I cannot figure out, it's a Flash video, and I cannot figure out how to make I've tried changing the Flash video language a few different ways, and I cannot make it stop auto-playing. So everything I do just seems to stop the video from playing entirely. So I apologize. The video auto-plays every time that it comes up. But if you just go down into the right-hand or left-hand corner and click the pause button, it will stop for you. But it's very irritating. It's irritating for me. I'm sure it's irritating for you to have the video autoplay every time you go into the week 4 page or into the discussion page. So just click on that left-hand corner of the video window, and it will stop. It'll stop playing. The medical arms race, that's the second discussion for this week. But also there is a paper for this week. This is a week with a lot of work. So this class, there are weeks that are a little lighter, weeks that are a little heavier. So keep that in mind. It's not a bad idea to look forward and perhaps get a jump on the next week when you're working. But so there is a paper this week, and you have a bit of latitude in the paper. It's really a paper to kind of talk about some economic principles and show that you're getting a grasp of some of these things. And I don't have it set to just hospitals. You can actually choose whatever type of setting that you're interested in, be it physician practice, hospital, long-term care, home health, whatever setting that you are interested in, integrated health systems. But it's described in the classroom. If you have questions or if you want to run something by me, feel free. I'm happy to give my thoughts on it as well. So that's about it for the upcoming week. So I look forward to discussions this week, and any questions you might have, like I said, please just let me know. So have a great week, and I'll talk to everybody soon. Thanks so much.